computer. Oh, I'm gonna actually have to turn my audio off.
Yeah, because we don't want me having to you.
Okay.
It's recording this, just so y'all know. We do have Gwen's showing again. I think she might be. I think we have her set as a host, maybe. Okay. Okay, y'all. So since the intros are going to take a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Let me get my notes ready for me first. So my name is Caitlin, and I'm the supervisor of programs here at the Grand Prairie Public Library. And just to let you guys know, we do programs for all ages. This one's obviously for adults. We also have a subset of programs that we call part of the Humankind Project. And in that, we really want to be educating about all different cultures and communities. So this technically falls into Humankind Project programming. Okay, so hello to everyone joining us tonight. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to participate in our first American Experiences program, focusing on the African American experience. In our American Experience series, we will be putting the spotlight on different minority groups in America. We hope to learn more about elements of their life that perhaps we didn't fully appreciate before. It is my hope that by listening and engaging with these issues, we can come out stronger as a community and be more supportive of one another. Tonight, we are joined by 5 guests from the North Texas area who are so generously sharing their experiences and perspectives with us. So I'm going to read little biographies of everybody before we get started and let everyone know who we have joining us. So first, we have Gerald Hodges. So Gerald, you can wave so people can see you. So this is Gerald. Gerald Hodges has been in law enforcement for 13 years, 8 years with the Grand Prairie Police Department. He graduated from Texas A&M with a sociology degree. While at Texas A&M, he volunteered in the Multicultural Center, participated in the Vice President student panel, and performed community service work with various organizations. Gerald also facilitated drug prevention support groups from South Dallas to Highland Park. During his 7-year tenure in education prior to law enforcement, he improved charter schools as an assistant principal in South Oak Cliff and Fort Worth. Gerald is currently a board member of the Grand Prairie YMCA and the TD Foundation. In his spare time, he serves as a decision counselor at his church and often speaks to youth groups. So that's Gerald. And next we have Bola, bidapo. Okay, thanks, Bola. So Bola was born and raised in Plano, Texas, and is the proud daughter of 2 Nigerian parents. Bola graduated from the University of Oklahoma as a journalism public relations major and Spanish and nonprofit minor in 2015. Through the course of her life, Bola has always been passionate about impacting her community, especially the next generation of leaders and youth. In 2018, Bola presented her first TED Talk entitled Inspiring the Aspiring, Equipping the Next Generation of Leaders. Bola is also the founder of 2 nonprofits, the Two Fly Foundation, which provides travel grants and passports to underserved students studying or volunteering abroad, and the Queen Talk, which instills leadership and entrepreneurial development in young girls. She also serves heavily within her church's youth group. In 2020, Bola started law school at the University of Texas in Austin. There are 3 T's that sums up what Bola loves: talking, especially about her faith, travel, and tacos. So thank you, Bola. Next we have Curtis. So Curtis McKinney. Curtis was raised in the Dalworth Park edition of Grand Prairie. He is the executive director of a community nonprofit organization called the Dalworth Civilian Citizen Review Committee, which was started back in 1997. Curtis, did you wave? It wasn't looking. Yep, so you guys can see Curtis. Then we have Byron Sanders. So Byron is a committed advocate for education, economic development, and creating equitable communities throughout Dallas, Texas. As the president and CEO of Big Thought, he works each day to explore innovative ways to narrow the opportunity gap for children. Byron has received myriad awards for his involvement in the community. He has been recognized as a Dallas Convention and Visitors Bureau Big Influencer, in Who's Who in Black Dallas, Dallas Foundation's Good Works Under 40, Innovator in Education from the Alcuin School, and as a TEDx speaker. In 2017, he was named a Presidential Leadership Scholar by the program led by the Presidential Centers of George W. Bush, William J. Clinton, George H.W. Bush, and Lyndon B. Johnson. In 2018, he received Parkland Foundation's Community First Award. And finally, we have Reverend Johnie McDowell-Dollarhide. Reverend Dollarhide, if you could wave for us. And Reverend Dollarhide is an ordained minister in full connection in the CME Church. She retired in 2018 marking 27 years in pastoral ministry and over 45 years in pastoral and lay ministry. Reverend McDowell-Dollarhide has enjoyed a bivocational career in both ordained ministry and education as a teacher and administrator in the public school systems of Tyler and Fort Worth, and an adjunct college professor at the University of North Texas Denton and the University of North Texas Dallas, Texas Wesleyan University in Fort Worth, and currently at Hill College in Cleveland, Texas. As a Christian life skills coach, ordained minister, teacher, and trainer, she's the founder and CEO of Training for Reigning Ministries, whose primary purposes are: 1, providing small group training workshops for women called into lay and ordained ministry, and 2, conducting racial reconciliation dialogue training retreat workshops for pastors of all races. So this is a really phenomenal group of people in front of us. Really excited to hear from all of y'all. I'm sure if we actually had an audience here in person that everyone would be clapping. For anyone just joining us, I am going to be reading questions out to our panelists. If you guys want to submit additional questions, you guys can do so in writing. I think you just type it in the chat section below, and then we'll have Christy, who's helping me out, but out of view, will share some of those with me, and we can ask those to the group. So to get started, in 1 minute or less, could everyone tell us your name once more and one fact about yourself that has nothing to do with your race? So let's start with Gerald.
Good evening. Good to see everybody. I think that's a very interesting question. I think that when we talk about one fact that doesn't have to do with race, I just look at it that my culture was a beautiful addition to the things that I do. And so I don't separate the two because I never see my culture as a burden. I just see it as a beautiful thing that has really added to my life. And I just share that with others. So I think the fact about myself individually is the fact that I do love art, I do draw, and I love doing community service. I think one of the best thing, as many of the panelists probably have experienced, is just the relationships that you make when you're out serving in the community.
Awesome, thank you, Gerald. Okay, how about Bola?
I'll definitely echo that as well. I think, I filter a lot of my loves and everything, but I think one thing that was already kind of shared in my bio is my just love for young people. I just love middle schoolers. I love high schoolers and pouring into them. And that's where a lot of my focus has been. I think that's, I think that love, I guess, definitely transcends races as well. So that would be my fun fact.
Great. How about Byron?
Hey everybody, Byron. I'm from Dallas. Again, grew up here. I'm a native kid. Actually, I am going to co-sign. It doesn't explicitly have to do with race, but I'm a Black man, and that's how I moved through this world. And so everything is touched by it, quite frankly. And so one thing I will say, though, that people may or may not relate to, I don't even know, but this is what it is. I love musical theater. Anybody who, everybody's on this Hamilton tip, which you should be, because it's one of the greatest pieces of art ever made. And I love Les Mis. I actually play basketball, and I'm kind of typical hood sports like track, football, basketball, all that stuff. And I stopped playing my junior year because we were doing the musical Little Shop of Horror. And I was like, I have to be the voice of the plant. Like, I saw it. That was one of my favorite videos growing up. So I was like, yo, you know what, coach, I love it. I wasn't about to get a scholarship anyway. It's fine. So yeah, I love musical theater.
I love that. Thank you, Byron. Curtis.
Yes, my name is Curtis McKinney. I was raised in Grand Prairie. I'm a grandfather of 4. And my thing is the future. I would like to see them be able to have equal opportunity and be judged by the content of their character, their quality and characteristics, and rather than the way they look or appear or stereotype definition of their character or whatever. So I would like to see everyone just be able to get along and be judged by their own merits and their own legacy, what they leave behind, you know what I'm saying?
Great, thank you. And Reverend Dollarhide? She's unmuting. She may need help, Christy. I think we still have you muted right now. Christy might be able to do it from there.
Okay.
We got you.
All right, good. Well, I a little bit like Curtis, I guess, a little bit like everyone except the music thing. I love music, Byron, but some of those names you called, I don't know them. But I am like Curtis. I'm a grandmother and a mother, and one of the biggest things I think I enjoy most is bragging on my grandkids and my kids. Now, they don't call it that. They think I talk about them too much, but I'm so proud of all of them, and they're doing so many good things. And another big thing for me is trying to share wisdom with them, you know, and I know they think I'm preaching to them, but I'm just trying to pass down some of the things I've learned so that they won't have to make the same mistakes. Everybody's got to walk in their own shoes, but sometimes you don't have to jump over the same paths that others have already jumped over if they can tell you about it. So I enjoy that. I love giving. I love helping people. That's another thing that I like to do. And I really right now am interested in racial reconciliation, especially in the area of the ministry and pastors, because I think that's where it starts. If we can turn the hearts of those who turn the hearts of people, then we can kind of get some things going on. So those are just a few of the things that I really love and that I'm really interested in.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the questions specifically about race and y'all's experiences living in this country. So this first question is going to be for everybody, and I'll just kind of call on y'all individually to answer. So what is one of the most hurtful things that people say or do with some regularity to you, and maybe they have no idea that it's hurtful for you? So let's start with Bola.
For me, in a lot of spaces that, and I know we're probably going to dive more into this, but as someone that grew up in Plano, Texas, a predominantly white city, going to a university like the University of Oklahoma, also predominantly white space, and then moving forward into now being at the University of Texas, my complete rival. So if you guys are Sooner fans, Longhorn fans, I'm sorry, I'm on both sides now. I don't know what to say. But, you know, there are a lot of things. I was actually having a discussion with a friend yesterday, but there's a lot of things that growing up, you didn't know what to call what you were experiencing, but you knew what it felt like. I think for me, even still a lot of spaces, not only am I, you know, African-American, but I'm also usually the youngest or usually one of the only females. So a lot of things that I battle with is the sense of undermining my intelligence and undermining my capability of completing a work or completing a task, because I take a lot of pride in my work and in my task. And oftentimes you have a lot of Black employees in spaces feeling the need to assimilate, right? And so there have been multiple moments where I have been in discussions, and now I'm talking, somehow the discussion diverted to talking about my hair. And it's like, why am I talking about my hair when I'm one of the, you know, a performing employee? Like, how did we get into this space here? So, you know, without, you know, necessarily like reliving certain traumas or anything like that, I think growing up constantly having to just have the most redundant questions. And then I think a second thing would be, is that sometimes a lot of, and I'm sure that a lot of Black people in this country would agree, but sometimes it's not even things that are directly said to you, but there's a collective hurt that a lot of Black people in this country have. So when we're talking about racial issues that are happening, and I hate to even say events because it's reoccurring, right? And then we see people justify some of the acts that are always continuing towards Black people. It's almost as if they said it to you. And there have been moments where having conversations about, you know, justifying the death of a young person, justifying why there's a gap in education, and you take it personally. It's not just, oh, you know, that it's a collective poke, you know, at your spirit. And so sometimes there's been moments of conversations like that that have hurt me more than someone personally attacking Bola specifically.
Very interesting. Thank you. Let's do Gerald.
And I really enjoyed the experience of what Bola was talking about. And I think we've all kind of experienced those microaggressions. And one of the things I had to look at was the intent behind what people were doing. Was it spawned by ignorance, or was it spawned by maliciousness? There's been opportunities where I've taken those moments to educate people, because their intent and what they thought they were doing didn't necessarily, they weren't doing it to be harmful. But at the same time, taking that moment to try to educate people and to see where exactly they are they willing to, in other words, are they willing to learn? And that kind of helps too, because I think when you're talking about reconciliation and when we're talking about bringing America back together, it's a process where we have to be ready for the people who have become enlightened and they say, you know what, I've been taught wrong by my culture, I've been taught wrong by my parents, and now I want to learn. And being open to those people that ask those questions. At the same time, it's guarding yourself and holding people accountable who do things out of maliciousness that affect the progress of African Americans. And so I've experienced things where people were unintentional and they didn't exactly know what how that would be offensive. Sometimes you have to educate people. For example, people may say to you when you're performing well or when you sound intelligent, well, you're not like most Black people that I know. And so you'd have to tell them, well, I'm not like the Black people that you know, but the people I know are entrepreneurs. They are college educated. They are honest blue collar workers. And so just expanding people's horizon. I think a lot of people now in this environment now do have questions, and it's not just African Americans. I do feel there are people who are left questioning what they were taught. And so it's a balance of holding those accountable who would do these things on purpose, and at the same time, judging the intent and being open to those who want to learn and improve their understanding of culture.
Great, thank you, Gerald. What about Byron? Oh, Byron, I think.
All right, sorry, got it now. All right, cool. So the thing that I will briefly say shows up often is it's a bit of a backhanded compliment. So you go through, you're doing whatever you're doing, get an award or an acknowledgement, or you say something smart in a meeting, and then somebody comes up to you, white brother or sister, and they say, especially if they know your story, they know kind of where you come from. They're like, wow, you grew up in Southern Dallas, so Oak Cliff and Pleasant Grove and whatnot, DeSoto a little bit. They're like, well, how can we get more of you? And I'm like, more of me. And they think they're complimenting me, right? Because they're like, wow, you have a degree and you're so articulate. And it's frustrating because, and I used to let it pass when I was younger, but I don't anymore. And I clarify for them what what they're actually asking, and I think it redirects to what the actual question should be. So the reality is there's tons of me. There's thousands, millions of me out there. And the fact that there's a few of us in this room right now has nothing to do with me being some kind of superhero or X-Man or anything like that. What it's an indicator of is a collective failure from society to be able to produce the kinds of conditions so that all the me's out here have access to the same opportunities that I had access to, that weren't an accident of place or purpose, so that they would be able to live the kind of life of fulfillment that they're entitled to. When we have a world where 1 in 3 Black baby boys born today are expected to be incarcerated at some point over the course of their lives, that doesn't say that there's a ton of things wrong with Black baby boys. What that means is we have systemic issues, systemic racism, structural racism, that are barriers to those Black baby boys being able to live the kind of life that they are entitled to, and that was written down a couple hundred years ago on a piece of parchment as we declare what this country is supposed to be. So when they say, how can we get more of you? Well, I'm ready for that conversation, but it ain't about just simply making a couple of here and there investments. We got to have a whole systems change.
Thank you for that. And Curtis, what about you?
Yes, it's about like the same as everyone has spoke. It's being stereotypical about African Americans' response to certain issues, questions, or concerns, and trying to distinguish, put me in a category as different from just a common mindset that could be, within the community or your surroundings. Because, I express conservative views and they say, oh, well, you're one of the smart ones, or you see things. And then they even come back with a little racist comments toward other people, like, oh, they're stupid, they don't understand. You know what I'm saying? You can tell that you're a smart one, or whatever like that, trying to distinguish when, it's just nothing, just a common human need and equality that I would like to see, not only for my own, for everyone, you know what I'm saying? But I would like to be able, for my people to look like me, to be able to present themselves.
Oh, he muted. He got muted. Are you? I think we'll ask. I think we lost Curtis's sound for a second, but thank you, Curtis.
I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I got cut off. But anyway, basically, like saying, I just don't like to be stereotyped, and I don't like the mumbo jumbo talk too. Though some of the guys trying to be fly or whatever talk, then you got mob and speaking in terms they wouldn't speak to other people. You know what I'm saying? Change their ways, their characters. According to me, I got a good friend that doesn't do that, but quite a few of my friends on Facebook, they find themselves do that, and I kind of correct them. Hey, what does that mean? They might use some kind of slang term out of content. I'm asking what does it mean? They oh, you don't know? And I was like, well, we really ain't on that level. We're talking business, may even be politics sometimes. So basically, I would just like to be just a judge for just who I am and how I present things, you know what I'm saying, and how I perceive things in my experiences, rather than it be based on how I look, how I look and, how you perceive me. I'm being judged by the cover, how I look, rather than what I say and what I do. So pretty much stereotype. I don't like that. That's it. All right.
Thank you. Reverend Dollarhide?
Yes. I agree with Curtis. There are two terms that I need to know what they mean. And that's IMA and IMO. When those are I guess it means I'm agreeing with something, but they'll say IMA. And I said, what does that mean? Or IMO? But anyway, I digress. But let me really piggyback on something Byron said. And he said something about a collective failure of society. And one of my biggest pet peeves is a collective failure of society to really know or value African American people. I was looking at Kelly Clarkston on, I guess, last night, and she highlighted a young lady that was making these beautiful African type garments for girls, for little girls and dolls and things. And Kelly said, how did you ever think of that? But any person who's African American and they know their history and they have pride and understand who they are, know that we know that it's not something that she thought of. It's just a part of who we are. We understand that our heritage is from kings and queens, not the ghettos of South, what we want to make ghettos in South Dallas and Chicago, but we know our heritage, and it's not a hard thing for us to come up with such things as royalty and garments of kings and queens and royalty. And so that particular kind of history has only been shared from generation to generation through Black families. It's been left out of history books in this country. It hasn't been passed down. And so Black people are thought of in those stereotypical, mythological ideas, ghetto ideas, that you're not worth doing anything, or you're not worthy, or you can't do. One of the biggest problems that I think I had, and I remember when I was doing my doctoral studies, is one professor who was about the only one teaching statistics. And in her mind, Black students, graduate students now, we're doctoral students, just could not do stats. And I dare say, if anyone ever passed under her, no matter what you did, it wasn't with any more than a D, the highest grade. Now, we had study groups, we had cohort groups. The work we turned in was the same, but the white students in her classes were able to pass the work. And the same work, there was always something wrong with the Black students' papers, the few that were there. And it's that sort of thing. It's the bigotry. It's the hardening of hearts is what I think. You don't know about me because you don't want to know about me. I know it's been left out, but you could open up. You could decide that I'm not going to think of you in this stereotypical idea, but I'm going to find out who you are, how you bleed, how you think, how you're like me, or how you're different from me as a human being. So that's my biggest pet peeve, that other groups don't really get to know us and who we are.
Thank you guys. That from everybody, that was, was already really good. I can already see things where I know that I've been guilty of these things in the past, and that it's just been too easy for me to be blind to. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to get to the individual questions for y'all. So let's start with Byron. Could you share a time when you have felt like someone lowered their expectations for you or told you to aim lower because of your race?
Yeah. High school, 10th grade. I remember I had just finished pre-cal, and it was the end of the year, and I actually worked my tail off to get an 80. And I was, getting ready to go to my next class, and I had to, choose what was going to be coming up. And I was ready to do calculus because, I figured I did pretty good by the end of the year. I struggled starting off, but I got it. My teacher said, you're not really ready for calculus. You should probably do statistics. And it was interesting because, one, math wasn't my favorite subject. And, I already worked hard at it, and statistics sounded easier. It sounded fun and applicable, right? Because I understood, I got stat. I know where I was going to use that. But also, I thought I was smart too, and the smart kids were taking calculus. And I thought I had earned it. And I didn't know why exactly, she might have tried to explain a little bit, but it certainly didn't settle in, because I felt like even as I signed up for statistics, I felt like I was settling. But my teacher told me I wasn't ready. So I believed her at that stage in my life. Only when I got to college and I had to take business calculus and I got an 85 in that, I was like, probably should have taken this in high school. I was ready. I was ready. But that's the thing that I think a lot of times people who are in the lives of young people don't recognize. They have a lot of power. A little offhand statement, she probably didn't even remember. If I walked up and told her today that, you know, you stole my confidence, she would probably be really hurt. She'd probably be like, what? You were great. I loved everything that we had a great time in class. I was like, yeah, I know, which is why I was so surprised when you told me I wasn't ready for calculus. So there have been moments like that that have come across, but I'll tell you also, I'll flip the script. I got my joy back when a Black male teacher told me that I was smart.
Mhm.
He said he said this was one of the best projects I've ever seen turn in. And that was important for me because I was in high school at a private school at that point. I had already taken a hit of confidence because, you know, I was coming from this public school, and my public school, I love my public schools. They grounded me in who I was. I loved who I was, especially my Black culture at that point. I was confident walking in there, but when I got there, I was a little behind. That math experience was tough. But that history experience with that Black male teacher who reinforced what I thought I knew about myself made all the difference. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Byron. Wow. Okay, so Gerald, tell us about an experience where you believe you were treated differently because of your race.
Wow, that's interesting. Throughout my life, I've had different scenarios. I remember working a night job, and I got 4 beautiful children. And so when people would see me during the daytime with 4 kids, certain assumptions were made about my employment and, and things that I was involved in. And and since then, I've kind of used that as a motivator to, one, to educate people, and two, uh, to perform well wherever I go, so as to perform in such a way that people's stereotypes cannot stand. That if you thought we were unintelligent, you thought we were not hardworking, uh, that would not be able to stand. You would have to question your thought pattern. And so that was kind of a driving force to have those opportunities to educate. Kind of taking into my new role, that same position of getting opportunity to educate and partner with some of our other community partners to also to strive and inspire other young people so that they can break through those barriers. Because one of the most important things is the thought that's in your head. And so I think it's also important that we empower ourselves and empower, especially young people, and start to shape the voices in their head. I think just like Byron said, what that teacher said and how that affected him. And so realizing the power of our words, I think it's great when I look at this panel and so many people are involved in the community, because that's the difference maker, because we're changing the voices in people's head. And we're challenging things that, the implicit bias that people are aware of, and some people are unaware that they have from their upbringing and growing up. So where I like the place that I'm working at now at Grand Prairie is that we're starting to make those steps to engage the community, and the community is engaging us back, through our midnight basketball, through the boxing program, through even reading to the kids in school, or our SROs who are into the city rec centers during the summer, so that people can ask the question and you can have those type of dialogues. Because not only is it beneficial to the young people, it's also beneficial to the officers, because the more we engage each other, the more that we're bringing understanding in the same way that we're doing today.
Great, thank you so much, Gerald. Bola, could you share anything that you think well-meaning white friends say or do that is hurtful to you? You kind of did this, but.
Well, you know what? Like I said, I grew up in Plano. I have 2, I'm fortunate where I have a beautiful group of friends, and 2 of them, one of my best friends, I've known them both since I was 6 and 8 years old. And we had a very, very candid conversation shortly after the death of George Floyd. And it was a very transparent conversation where it was not to invoke guilt or anything, but it was a candid conversation to say, as your friend that have grown up, we have to create, this has to be a safe space where we can talk candidly about things that are affecting me. Like, they've grown up in me. They've seen how I have been treated differently from the playground all the way through us going to the mall, and I'm being followed in the store and you're not. But having the time to have the education. And so what I tell my well-meaning non-Black friends, even including friends that are not just white, but just friends that are not Black, because I have friends that might be Hispanic but are white passing, et cetera, whichever. And I tell them two things. One, it is not my burden as your Black friend to take on the burden of what I like to call white guilt, right? So when we kind of have these conversations, it becomes uncomfortable because there has to be, even if you yourself as a white friend would not consider yourself racist, or you're not racist, obviously, when we talk about things like white privilege and things like that, there's kind of this sense of guilt. And I had to tell my friend, I'm like, this conversation is not for you to feel guilty, but if you do feel that way, I can't take that burden of kind of pacifying you to make you feel good. It's a learning experience. And what I tell my friends is that instead of, there has to be a level of humility when you're having this conversation, because the first thing is that you want to be defensive. You want to prove that you're not racist. You want to prove that you don't experience white privilege. And instead of just heeding and taking back and having a level of humility and kind of dropping your ego almost for a sense to assess, how have you, my right friend, have you been able to navigate in this world that I haven't? And understanding that, acknowledging that does not make you yourself a racist, but understanding, as Byron was saying, that there is a bigger system that we have to evaluate and, completely transform. And so I also tell my well-to-do white friends too, as well, like, I love panels like this, but you have to make this personal. And that's what I tell them. It's like, this can no longer be a white and Black issue, because it's not. It's not a conservative versus liberal issue. It's not a Republican versus Democrat issue. We're talking about a heart humanitarian issue. And so what I tell them is, I don't want you to fight against racism because I'm your Black best friend. I want you to fight against racism because we're talking about humanity. And so, I told them, like, when you're out and you're in these streets, and my friend texted me the other day, she's like, well, I just told somebody off and I told them whatever. And I was just like, you go, friend. I'm so proud of you. But I tell her, I want you to do that because that's the love in your heart, understanding that there's no room for hate. Not because, oh, my best friend is Black, but because you yourself acknowledge that this cannot be a part of our society anymore. So that's the advice that I tend to have a conversation with my non-Black friends.
Thank you so much for that. And okay, Reverend Dollarhide, obviously you were deeply involved in the church. Could you talk to us a little about the role that the church has played in both sustaining racism in the status quo and in fighting it? And how could the church work to be part of the solution?
Okay, good questions. At my hurt, I guess, or difference in the church has been more in lines with gender rather than race. Women have had to, and are still fighting for equality and recognition in the church. But I think the church now is much more conscious of the need to look at racism and systemic racism in particular, and do something about it. There's a group of pastors in Cleveland that I work with, both Black and white pastors, and they've made a commitment, or we've made a commitment, very recently that we are going to try to do something to make a difference. Now, mind you, this same group, and I look at everything as before George Floyd and after George Floyd. Our discussion before George Floyd was taking down the statue in Cleveland and other Confederate statues. And there was just very little concern, to be honest, from those pastors, like, that's good, but I don't have a dog in this fight. That's not my fight. But now I think after post George Floyd, there's more of an opening of the heart where we know that if we see something, we've got to say something. And that's the position I think the church is beginning to take. We see this now. We see white privilege. We can't just continue to sit back and say nothing. And so I commend the churches in Cleveland who will be doing something. In addition to that, even some of the churches in Burleson are taking bold steps, these are white churches, to ask their congregations to adopt statements of racial reconciliation and the need to get rid of it, more racial harmony. Now that's bold. We were talking Cleveland, Texas, Burleson, Texas. And for white pastors to go into white churches and say, we need to adopt this. We need to adopt a statement saying that this sort of racism must go and we have to stand against it. And to tell you the truth, it's just as hard to get Black churches sometimes to trust white churches enough to want to work with them. So we have a problem there too, because we have seen too often where the discussion and the dialogue starts, but nothing changes. Hearts don't change, minds don't change. So we have a long way to go.
Thank you very much. Okay, Curtis, can you share a time when you felt like you were in danger because of your race? I think we've got you muted right now, Curtis.
Am I unmuted now?
You are unmuted.
Am I unmuted?
Mhm.
Okay. I remember back when I was probably about 8 or 9, I was walking from the store, me and 2 of my brothers, and was walking, and it was a main highway, which is Jefferson. I don't know, Jefferson Highway to go through Grand Prairie, and then right there in the neighborhood was a street called Galveston, which one we lived on. I was walking one day, and happened to be walking from the store, and we was walking, me and my 2 brothers walking along, come to the store, candy, whatever. It might have been right about done, about 6 o'clock, and we heard some popping sounds, and we heard something coming by, whistling by, and happened to look over, and there's some white guys was out the one that with the car shooting at us, and my brother, we had never been around shooting anything in Grand Prairie. It wasn't that bad in Dalworth. In the younger days, we hadn't been around a lot of shooting, so my older brother said, they shooting at us, so we took off running. And one good thing is that we didn't try to veer off and run from it. We ran the same way we was going toward home. We ran in the direction they were traveling, so it was harder for them to hit us. But subconsciously, we did that, because usually you would run away from it, and they probably would have shot one of us in the back. We'd have ran in a direct angle in front of them. But, it was just right there in Grand Prairie, and it was just for no reason. I was wondering, how would those guys just take shots at us? We was little kids. You could tell we was 8, 9 years old. I know I made 8 or 9, and I had a brother older and one younger. But, it was just unnecessarily. And plenty of times, too, we used to ride from the Dalworth Park Edition over to the northeast end of Grand Prairie to play basketball and stuff with the other recreation with our Caucasian and Hispanic friends. But a lot of times we would come in and people would chase us. We got chased a couple of times from over there by older teen Caucasian people. They came, they called us niggers or whatever, and we might have said, forget you or whatever, and took off on our bikes. But they actually was circling those streets trying to find us, being older kids. And we may have been 15, 16 or whatever, maybe not even that old. But these were the adults, young adults, and I'm pretty sure they had something that, probably would hurt us, But in this one particular time we was running, I remember my younger brother Chain came off his bike, and he was just running with the bike, and I was like so afraid that he was gonna come around that corner, and I was gonna have to go back and try to rescue him and whatever. So just little things like that, being picked at and tried to be hurt just because of we was innocent kids. We didn't know anything about violence or So that's basically it. That was one thing that stick out from a childhood, and I remember, and like I said, and I remember those bullets coming by, and I remember the loud sound, shoo, the going by us, whatever, the bullets, and I just remember, what I'm saying, that they could have lost their lives just for, I don't know. I guess it was fun to them because they was kind of have to one, they probably having a good time with it. But I was like, how could you shoot at people like that? And we were, like we were animals or whatever. So that's one thing now.
Thank you, Curtis. Okay, Bola, so your parents immigrated to this country. How has being a first-generation American shaped your experience here?
I'm definitely a proud Nigerian girl. I like to say that, see, and I think this is a beauty about Black people too. Going back to what Pastor McDowell was saying, was that when people in the country take the time to learn about people, and obviously today we're talking about Black people, they realize that there's so much diversity even within the Black community. So I like to say that I got a dual experience, right? I'm growing up, and this also took a lot of growing up my family too. I'm growing up in Plano, Texas, predominantly white schools. In my household, I'm Nigerian. But when I walk out the door, no one knows the difference if I'm Nigerian or not. So, having conversations within the house and about, experiences as Black Americans. But I know what my parents went through as not only Black students, undergrad students and then grad students, but, as immigrants, right, going through that barrier, but then obviously being Black citizens as well. And it definitely shaped my view. I think being able to, and it shaped my view in regards to even experiencing or being empathetic to my Black friends, for lack of better terms. I consider myself Black, but my Black American friends and their experiences, and knowing that their household experiences was oftentimes different than mine as far as views and ideologies. And I think if anything, being Nigerian also just made me love being Black even more, because going back to how we're all intersected and how we all have so much beauty both in the African cultures but Black American cultures, it only just made me love my identity even more. But you also go through the multiple, as much double portion of loving your culture, double portion of different microaggressions, right? So being told from my college advisor, which I'm sure she meant well, but saying you should put U.S. citizen under your name so that, your resume will be higher considered, right? Because I have a foreign name. Or when you're growing up, like, I grew up on the street with you. Why are you asking me if I've ever seen an elephant? Or I grew up in a hut. And that's why I was so happy when Black Panther came out, because my cousin all of a sudden had street cred. Now everyone thought Africa was cool. Black Panther's out. Everyone loves it. Everyone wants to be African. But, you grow up. So if anything, it was I will say double-edged sword, because I'm proud of who I am. But when you're talking about navigating, you're dealing with the stereotypes that are associated around Africans. I'm dealing with the stereotypes that are associated around Black people in general. But it only, especially as I grow older, it only just made me love who I am even more, that I get to experience the richness of all of that at once.
Great, thank you. Notes here. Okay, sorry guys, I'm going to assume a little bit confused on what you skipped to. Sorry guys, real fast. Oh, so Byron here? Okay, so Byron, we're coming to you. What do you fear most for your own children or family members because of the color of their skin?
What do I fear most?
Mhm.
Um, what I fear most um, for my family is and for my kids. Um, I fear that the world um, will start to, or could at some point have an effect on how they see themselves. The thing that I think is most important is that people will talk about things that are barriers to people, and being parts of demographics and things like that. Sometimes, if we're not careful, you'll start to hear people say, one of the barriers that I had to overcome was being black. Being black is not a barrier, right? That is not the problem. Being black is wonderful. I love it. It's a beautiful thing to be. Um, and the barriers are the systems of racism, and those are the barriers. And so what we have to be clear to do is to make sure that we're being honest with our kids about how the world is structured, the hierarchy of human value, the false hierarchy of human value that's been set up in which they live, but making sure that they recognize that they are powerful, they are beautiful, they are brilliant, um, they are a sovereign, unique, and wonderful creation of God. They are all of that, and they're black, and black is all of that. And so the thing that is a fear of mine for them is um, and it's really not even a fear, it's an awareness um, that we have to intentionally ingrain. And I'll give you an example of what that means. For my son, he drew a picture of his mother one day. He brought home a portrait, and she had blonde hair and white skin. And um, that day, it was so clear because we expose our kids to their culture, and they ain't around nothing but black people because it's their family all the time, right? Like they're around lots of other people, but they're around lots of their family. There's so many cousins. So um, for that to have happened meant that he got that from somewhere. He didn't get that from us. He got that from somewhere else. And so we have to actually, black people have to be intentional to make sure that they know that they are all those things that I mentioned earlier. And we have gone over the top with making sure that they know that your hair is amazing. Look at all the cool things you can do with it. Come through. That is gorgeous, right? Um, love your curls, love your naps. That's beautiful. Look at what we can do with a sponge curl. You see this? Is amazing. It's like magic. It's crazy. And so our kids know and love who they are, but that was a very early lesson for us because he had to be three, maybe 4 years old. He was in preschool
Mhm.
when that happened. And so the fear has been attacked with our intentional parenting and raising them, and also knowing though that we got to be real honest about how the rest of the world is, so so that we know how to move in these places and spaces, not shy away from who we are, love who we are, and then also know that these are some of the things that we have to do when we're interacting in a business setting or with police officers, or if you're in a place where you're liable to be trailed or tracked in a retail establishment, things like that. They know about that stuff, but they still hold their head with pride, and they never shy away from who they are now. That was my fear, and we're taking precautions to mitigate it.
Awesome. Gerald, could you tell us about your experience with racism as a police officer? and how do you see both sides of the issue? And what are your goals for the city as the new inclusion officer?
Well, I think, you know, being a African American police officer is a great position to be in. It's also a very interesting one where you see things from both sides, you hear things from both sides. And so I look at it as a great opportunity to educate. And the things that I have seen have been even, you know, misunderstanding. Is basically finding a way for us to communicate, because there are certain things that I think that from the African American standpoint, you don't want to be judged and be a stereotype. And then from a police officer standpoint, it's the same way. You don't want to be judged and you don't want to be a stereotype. So you fight both of those. And so you fight the stereotype that people see the uniform and they assume the uniform is the same every state and every city, which is not the case. I know that where we're at, the city of Grand Prairie, we're making great strides to be so much further than where we were several years ago. There have been people in our hiring practices that when we find out what they had on social media, they did not get hired. And so now it's a matter of getting good police officers what they need and getting rid of the officers who don't need to be there. And so we've taken great strides to do that. I think being a police officer right now in America, because one of the things that I hear people say to me is that from the white counterparts, they say, well, I'm not a racist, so why are people saying this? And so I have to explain to them that other people's experiences, they may not be dealing with an officer like you. And so I think a lot of times what we pay for in the community as well as the police department is you pay for the 1%. So, you know, if you're a police officer and you go to a neighborhood that has a high crime, and if that is your first interaction with people of color, then you may be swayed to a certain thought process. The same way that when you see things on the news and the media and how the media doesn't talk about the community initiatives that police departments do. They don't talk about some of our community engagement programs that we're doing. The 7 steps that we have to make sure and protect, you know, because we want to protect what we do here in our image, because we see how debilitating that can be to the community. And so my goal as an inclusion officer is to further those efforts by the city to bring us together. And we've had great success with that with a community policing model, because the more that we work together, the more that we're able to learn about each other. And when people talk about progress, I look at the fact that we're progressing in such a way that people who have those types of views, they now don't have anybody to share them with. You know, so not to say that your organization is perfect, but if you have those type of views and you go into the hallway and try to share those organizations, you're quickly going to be admonished by somebody else. Because the biggest challenge for America, the majority of people are not the Derek Chauvin that puts the knee on the neck of George Floyd. The hardest challenge for most America is not to be the 3 others, not to let someone say a racist comment in front of you, not to let someone say a joke and not address it. And so the more that we can fortify and have people who won't be bystanders but upstanders, who take an initiative to make change, then the better that we're going to be. And so we're encouraging an environment to do that. And we've been very successful with the police department in terms of working with our community partners and getting out there with the community and hearing what they have to say. So the only way that we're going to be able to hear what they have to say is to be out there among them. We're going to have to come to the table. And I think the person that stands on one side of the room and says, I absolutely will not sit down with this person. And the person that sits on the other side says, I absolutely will not sit down with this person. Those are not going to be the people that change America. I think the problem is we have a lot of or statements, but not and statements. And so people say, well, Black Lives Matter. Yes, You can put a period on it. You don't have to put an asterisk or a comma. Black Lives Matter. And then if Tuesday comes and our Hispanic brothers come to us and they say, hey, we don't think things are equitable for us, then we're going to stand with them. And then if 2 months down the line, police officers come and say, hey, we don't think that they represent the things that the good police officers, what we're doing, we don't think this gets enough story because of the media, then we're going to address that. I think we have these or statements where, yes, Black Lives Matter and police officers matter. And I think the group that is really underrepresented are good people who want to make great change. And so the way that we're preventing, and I think you have to have a destination in mind. So you have to have a destination of where you want to end up at. If you don't, you will allow your movement to be exploited. And so we have to have a destination in mind of what this world looks like that we want to live in so that people do not exploit that movement for their own personal agendas.
Thank you, Gerald. Let's go to mix these up a little bit. Reverend Dollarhide, what can white people or other non-African Americans do that has the greatest impact in the fight for racial equality? And is there anything you see people doing that does not have the impact people believe it does? We've got you on mute. There we go.
There is a book by, what is her name? Robin.
Deanna.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it is white fragility. And I was talking to another pastoral friend of mine about that. Our biggest problem, I think, in my opinion, with dialogue between white and blacks, and I'm talking pastors now, is the fragility of whites to try to place themselves in a position to understand what blacks are talking about when they describe their experiences and they describe their life. That fragility means that they become so fragile that all they can think of is, you're accusing me, you're blaming me, or I'm not like that, or I'm not, my grandfather or grandparents did that, I didn't do that. And we can't break through all of that isolation because of the fragility. What we got to do is to begin to listen. Listening in dialogue is just as important as talking. Hear what I'm saying from my heart. Hear my story. And once everybody has a story, you can hear my story. And whites have stories too. But that's going to be our biggest breakthrough, is to begin to listen to each other rather than being so fragile that we're thinking that everything is said, I'm being blamed, I'm being accused. If we can't get beyond that, we'll never be able to make our conversation worthwhile.
Thank you so much. Let's do Curtis. How do you think the coronavirus pandemic exposed the racial inequities within our system? And we're gonna need you to unmute yourself again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. The fact that we're going through what we're going through right now, during this major pandemic, going through the marching, the racial injustice. You know, we had a major pandemic where everybody's lives was in the ballot. The country was shut down, and then we got still focused on African Americans, small petty crimes. Which, you know, a crime is a crime, misdemeanor, whatever. You know, what George allegedly passed in a $20 bill or something like that, George, Mr. Floyd. But anyway, for him to be treated and, you know, choked out, you know, a human being being choked out like that, you know, like an animal or something on you know, before everyone, you know what I'm saying? And you know, and the officer knew they were recording it, but he didn't feel like he was gonna get in trouble because, you know, he felt like his life was worthless. And this happened time and time again, and nothing has happened about it. But anyway, with this going on, this pandemic going on, and there's been more focus put on the request for equality and just justice rather than the overall impact that the virus has had on the economy, people way of life, unemployment, and just families in general. And as businesses it's going away, for good, So we're not focusing on that right now. Everybody said Black Lives Matter, you know what I'm saying? Which Black Lives Matter is a good thing in a certain sense. But Black Lives Matter does not represent Black people. You know what I'm saying? You got to understand that. They're for different, the gay, lesbian agenda, the immigrant agenda. It's more than just African Americans, but people will say, "Oh, y'all love those niggers or whatever. Y'all fighting for it," and it's not all about blacks. I mean, Black Lives Matter. They're doing their part. You know what I'm saying? It's from their point of view. They're doing their part, but that's not the totality of what the Black American grief is. What our suffering is. It's not all about just the George Floyd thing. It's the systematic thing. It's at times I've been stopped for a traffic violation. I remember being taken to jail for that violation. How can you take me to jail for something I haven't been found guilty of? It's just, but they want to go and I guess do it, subject me to that. I was, jail, got right out or whatever, but still, rather than be allowed to wait and pay for that ticket later on, I was taken in at the time. So right now with the pandemic, it's still that we under scrutiny, rather than trying to the whole country be concerned with the way of life and what's post-pandemic, we're still going through some of the same stuff that's been going on since back in the 60s. My father went through some of the same things I went through. His father probably went through some of the same things similar. But, and my thing is I just would like for this thing to change. So really some true change come from this. It's going to be more than the Black Lives Matter thing, the movement going on with the rioting and all that. Because that's only for a certain agendas. That's not completely, and I don't know how much it really is for the African American agenda, but African American issues have been used as a platform for other organizations and what have you to take off and use our agenda to get political, economical, or whatever media attention when there's nothing in the end. It goes back, it's the same thing. We've been, since the civil rights movement, I'm saying? We've been asking and complaining about the same things. They're pretty much human rights, not civil rights. We just want to be viewed as human. We don't want to be, have a gun or be subjected to any move. You know what I'm saying? Put your hands on the steering wheel and be still and act like a robot. You know what I'm saying? And these supposed to be peace officers coming with, make you feel comfort if you're not doing any kind of crime, nothing serious. You're running around with dynamite or guns or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But just a simple traffic stop for me means, hey, you better go ahead and call your mom or someone and let them know what's going on. Have somebody on the recording because you never know how this thing may change. And then I thought with this being this pandemic, things would be looked at different, but still everything's looked over and we just to keep a foot on our neck, to make sure, keep them in control, As a matter of fact, and one more thing is, we had an issue over in the area I lived in, and the officer came, he was more interested in keeping me from leaving my residence, the apartment complex, than the issue that was a few complexes over, you know what I'm saying? Because he just stereotyped me, oh, he may be one of the crooks getting away or whatever. And I'm like, and everybody said, hey, it's going on down there, And he didn't believe it until this Hispanic lady told him, no, it's down there, what's going on, you know what I'm saying? But it's just, it's things seem more to put a damper on what we're trying to do, our success, our self-accomplishment, you know what I'm saying? And this pandemic, you know what I'm saying, it hasn't made any difference. The focus is still on, tapping out whatever we may try to stand and look up to our, request, you know what I'm saying, for the good of us all anyway.
Great. Thank you,
So
Curtis.
basically, still being stereotyped.
Okay. We're going to wrap up soon. I'm going to throw a couple more questions out. I'm just going to do this for the group. So if someone answers first or holds their hand, otherwise I'll just call on one of y'all. What do you think or how do you feel when a white person or a non-African American says they don't see color? Anybody want to share an opinion? Byron?
Okay, all right. Now I'm unmuted. I think they should see their physician as soon as possible, because it's, you know, monochromatic vision is nothing for us to. It's not a game, guys. It's serious. No, whenever people say that I can't see color, I get what they're saying. I understand. And what they're trying to say is, you know, I judge people by the content of their character, and I don't make a judgment. I don't make an assignment of value to the color of a person's skin. What I hear from that is, I don't see you. We talked a little bit earlier on in this conversation about how when you said, hey, tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with your race. There's nothing about me that has nothing to do with my race, right? Because it is who I am. It's part of me. I carry it with me everywhere I go. So when somebody says they don't see that, you know, we've been talking about a lot of deficit-minded stuff. I said it earlier. There's one beautiful, fantastic things about being Black, and I love it. Matter of fact, there's some very nuanced things about being Black that if you overtly say, I don't see color, you're gonna miss. So what you'll miss is how calling one of my kids, oh, look at the little monkeys, they're here. You know, I've heard white people refer to their kids as that, and that's fine, right? They're having fun. They're like, oh, the little monkeys jumping around. Don't ever call a Black person's child a little monkey. Don't buy me a shirt with it. I'm sending it right back. Put the receipt in the box, right? Like those are little tiny, you know, funny things, but also you'll miss the reality that my experience is different from yours. That my life, when I leave my door and I step out, I have a completely different set of considerations that I have to take into account in order to just survive, let alone thrive. So when you say I don't see color, that means we're not on the same plane. And oftentimes when we start to really get into what are real changes that we need to see in society, we're not going to be speaking the same language. So I encourage you to see color, and I encourage you to see your own color as well. One of the things that I think whiteness as a concept has done is it has robbed white people of a feeling or an awareness that they have culture of their own, that they belong to a group of people with norms, identities, and things. And so funny when you do a racial equity event or workshop or training, you ask people, hey, what's your culture? A lot of times they can't explain it. You know, one of the greatest ways for a white person to recognize that, have them go overseas, go to Europe, go to Italy, go to Spain, go to something. You'll be very aware that I am a white American and that people see me as such, and people see me as something. Now I have color because it's framed against something. When people say I don't see color, what you're saying is you don't see me.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think I've got two more I'm going to throw out to the group. Okay. Oh, number 7. Oh, okay. Yes. Do you want to go?
Well, I was just going to say Byron gave some wonderful sociological answers. I'm a sociologist, and he was so right about that. I say to them, liar, liar, pants on fire. And the only reason I say that is because it's like the people who say, oh, well, you know, I have all my friends are Black. I have a lot of Black friends, and no, they've never invited anyone to their house. Their kids don't play with anyone who's Black. They don't centered together around holidays. They just talk to each other over coffee in the office, and they think, well, I have a lot of Black friends, or all my Black friends are Black. And so I just say it's a cliche, and it's something that really they should really think about saying before they say it. I don't like it. Liar, liar, pants on fire. It's not true.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
I was just
Okay.
gonna-
Thank you.
I
Oh,
was just
sorry,
gonna add
Gerald.
this,
Yeah. Go.
You know, because I totally agree with Byron said, is that I understand the intention behind it. What they're trying to say is that they're not, that that's not the standard in which they judge people. I think it still leaves the question, but do you appreciate color? And so I think that is when people say that statement, they don't realize what they're trying to say is, hey, I just see you as a person, but we want you to see our color. It's okay. It's not a negative thing. It's just what are the attitudes and the norms towards that are important. So I agree with Byron that it is a great educational piece to say, well, do you appreciate color? You know, and giving people the opportunity to say that, hey, well, this is what I meant. Well, this is what I hear, and this is what other people, you know, hear as well. So, you know, like you said, I understand the intent that what you're trying to say is that this is a character, that character is the judgment, but it still leaves the question, do you appreciate color? So I think that maybe a better statement is that that is not what I use to judge someone's character. It may take a little more effort, but it's more meaningful.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next one I'm going to throw out is this is big. What does racial justice look like right now? Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
I think racial justice is when we don't have to put racial in front of justice, where it's just justice. Justice is supposed to be where someone is judged solely on what they did, and it's equitable for everybody. The challenge is, and I hear people say, you know, systemic racism, and some people roll their eyes when they hear that term. What I try to explain to people is there's two acknowledgments for us to move forward in America. One is that racism is an American problem. Two, there are good people who don't look like me, otherwise there's no point in having the conversation. So when it comes to, when you know, the question I always tell people to break it down is, well, do we believe there's racist people in America? Yes. Do those people have jobs? Do some of those people have key positions in court, law enforcement, CEO officers? That happens. And so I think that one of the things that as we move forward to justice is understanding those pieces, but also taking the approach that we're going to empower ourselves and get in the building. Whether it takes twofold things, not just be outside of the building. And one of the things when I talk to young people, I said, yes, protesting, absolutely, that is the right that we fought for. A harder way may be, because you may take 10 minutes to do a sign and you make 10 minutes to come up with a chant, but a harder way may be, but it's more impactful, is when you push through and go to school despite the challenges that you may have, so that you can be the doctor, so that you can be the police officer, so that you can be the teacher to encourage that child. And so when you're in those positions, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, we seek diversity as a department, and been able to prove that doesn't mean that you lower a standard. It just means that you have a benefit of a wider perspective to different problems to bring new solutions. And so I think that it's important that we find ways, one, to sit at the table together to have these discussions, but not only that, but put ourselves in positions where we can make key decisions that affect law enforcement, that affect justice, so that we can change the fact that it's no longer racial justice, it's just justice.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't even thought of it in that way. Bola, were you going to say something? Or am I calling you out?
No, I mean, I don't want to be redundant. I think that Officer Hodges really hit that on the head, and I co-sign. So I'll wait for the next question. I don't want to be.
Well, the last one I was going to throw out, actually, no, I've just forgotten. Oh, this is to all of y'all, especially in this moment. Can you tell me about the burden of needing to explain just any of this racism to white people?
Yeah, I'll start since I was talking. I'll go back to what I was sharing earlier about I'm a type of person where I do love to teach and I love to learn. So, but going back to when I was sharing the anecdote about my best friends that I've known since I was 6 and 8 who are white, and I'll even go back to a lot of my friends that I went to college with and who are genuinely wanting to learn. I think I got really burnt out because I quickly realized that a lot of times, even though, even the panelists here who generally are here because they want to be a part of create this dialogue, it can get exhausting. It can be reoccurring trauma almost a lot of times. And it takes a lot of time to, one, as people, you are trying to heal already, but you're also trying to educate. So it can be exhausting. And that's why I have continued to tell people, non-Black people, that it has to become your responsibility. There are so many resources. There are so many things, and I don't mind teaching. If a lot of my Black friends are not about that. They're like, listen, I'm not going to teach anybody anything, and I don't blame them because it is exhausting. And I think as well, because we've had Black people continually teach in multiple ways, whether it's through writing, whether it's through musicals and poetry, or it's through art, it's through literally podiums and speeches, and you've had Black people for the course of history continuing to explain and continuing. It is time for people who are not Black to take on the burden and responsibility. And that's why I tell my friends, I said, people don't need to continue to hear from me. It is time for you to educate those around you. It's time for you to educate your family. You're going to have those hard conversations with your family. You're going to have those hard conversations with your friends, with your colleague, with your boy club, when you're out in the golf course and they didn't invite that Black employee or that, study group or whatever, and someone says something totally insensitive or ignorant. It is time for other people besides Black people to take on that burden. I also think sometimes it's not fair that, you have Black people that are trying to heal from constant trauma, but then we're also having to be, educators. So even as much as I do appreciate and, when I understand when someone comes to me with a question, there's a willingness to learn. But it can no longer be just my issue. There has to be an innate desire and want in ownership. I think that's the word. There has to be an ownership in this process of us rectifying racism. And the ownership means that you're going to have to get your hands dirty and go through the weeds and read and research and do what you can to be a self-educator.
Awesome.
I just kind of want to piggyback on what Bola said, because I think, there are some things that can be exhausting, and I think that's why we have to lock arms with other people. And that's so key to have those partnerships, that when we lock arms with others who have that mindset that they want to reconcile America. And like I said, the biggest challenge for America is to be those three others. Are you going to stand idly by and be a bystander, or are you going to be an upstander? The more I get into the community and the more we meet people and the more that we have those relationships, the more we develop advocacy where people who don't look like me are starting to tell the story. Because once you challenge people's thoughts, and one of the ways that I really encourage people is to get involved with community engagement, get involved with community service. It is a way, particularly for people who are, for Caucasian people, to really get involved and really learn and have an ambassador there. So if you go to the Boys and Girls Club, or you go to the YMCA, or you go to the city rec centers and you start getting involved there, now you have this city rec person who's going to be the ambassador and usher you through this world and begin to teach you. And also, it will allow you to see a different perspective while doing something great with other people who are doing good things. So I think the more that we get out here, one of the things that really excites me is the opportunity to get out there, because I know the more people that I educate, then the less problems that we have in the world. One of the things I share with people is that there is no neutral territory. We're either going to claim land for the good and the gracious, or we're going to leave it for the deviant. So we have to continue the fight to claim that ground and continue to grow the ranks of people who have understanding, who have social consciousness, and continue to support programs that do that, so that we can grow the ranks and claim more territory, so that when someone does have those viewpoints, now they're challenged to find an ally in which to further those.
Guys, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you want to add? Is that Curtis? Are you about to? Anybody want to add anything?
Yeah, I was going to add. Go ahead. You go ahead. Go ahead.
I wasn't. I'm just asking y'all. I just see you and Reverend Dollarhide.
Yeah.
You can go ahead.
Okay, no, I was going to just add that for explaining the Blue Lives Matter thing, it's not that African Americans don't value the lives of officers, the same as anyone else. It's just that so sick and tired of year after year, time after time, it's been African Americans have been killed by officers, and there haven't been an overwhelming issue. It's been things simple as selling cigarettes or traffic violations or mistaken identity, and these people winding up there, overkill, if you ask me, 7 or 8 times to shoot a man, you know what I'm saying? You making sure he's dead. You know what I'm saying? But I talked to some of my friends about things like that. They say, well, Blue Lives Matter too. I say, well, these guys wasn't putting these officers' lives in danger when they standing on the corner panhandling or whatever they may have been doing. I feel like they're surviving. But like I said, we don't disregard blue lives. We just we just don't like the abuse that some of the people within the office using the badge as a shield to protect their organizations, their private organizations, which are racist ideologies that they have among their buddies or whatever, you know what I'm saying? I've worked in places, saying there was segregations there. Yeah, the blacks complaining about this, the whites complaining about this, and whatever. And we all worked together, but it was a split in this about what was going on. You know what I'm saying? What the company needed or whatever, and who was doing what and all that. But I say this to say, yeah, we respect and we appreciate officers. I've had some good relationships with some Grand Prairie officers since the organization. Then I would talk to assistant chief, which is a black guy. She's one of the assistant chiefs, deputy chiefs, is a black guy a few times, you know what I'm saying? And he's expressed a lot of concerns with the things that's going on in Dalworth, in my community, in our neighborhood, but you just never knew that anyone had an interest on my level, just the street level or whatever you want to call it, the common level, to make the change. It was like we was waiting for someone else to come and make it, or the officers to come and make it, you know what I'm saying? Well, we wanted to do that for ourselves, But like I said, when Blue Lives Matter as well as Black Lives, we just don't like when the Black lives are taken for no good cause, That's basically it, I haven't explained that.
And I want to say also that one of the things that we definitely have to understand is that not all police departments are the same, and also that I tell people all the time that Blue Lives Matter is not a rebuttal to Black Lives Matter, and that people have this misnomer that we're on opposite sides of the volleyball net, that a life that is lost in the community is somehow celebrated on this side of law enforcement. And that's not the case, you know, because I grieve when I see some of the lives that are lost in America. And we're strongly, especially in Grand Prairie, disavowing those individuals that take those actions to take those lives, because we're grieved by it. And when I say grieved by it, it's not only people that look like me, it's other people who got into this, into law enforcement to be honorable. It's why we have programs like Blue Courage, why we have the 4 pillars, Grand Prairie Fit Force, which is the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, the financial, because we understand that healthy people make healthy police officers. So we're doing those guidelines. And so I think also that really what needs to be said, because we do understand that the media sways a lot, is that they paint this picture of adversity because a fight is good for media, but not enough for the good officers and the people who are working together in the community. For example, we worked with the TD Foundation just to hand out hot plates in the Dalworth community. We were just in the Juneteenth parade, marching in Dalworth. We just went by to see Susan Delgado at the Y to give school supplies. But those things never really make the media because that's not a story and that's not always the agenda of most people. And so one of the things I always want to invite people to do is, definitely join the Citizens Police Academy. See from the inside what officers do. And then not only that, you'll have an objective view of what is right and what is wrong so that you may understand some practices. And then when you come against some of those practices that are not right, you know the proper channels in which to speak out against it, And so I always leave my door open to that. And I still have citizens who call me because they have questions about what's going on in their neighborhood. So I don't think that, I don't think Blue Lives Matter is a rebuttal to Black Lives Matter. Like I said earlier, I think there's too many or statements and not and statements, because we're going to have to come together. And that's one of the reasons why we came up with the programs, and that's why we are out in the community. And one of the things that I love is that this is officer initiated. The TD Foundation is started by Takesha Dye, who's an officer who just wanted to do more in the community. And we have Chief Hogan, who is helping out with the HELP program, where we're taking kids from the Justice Department and we're sitting down and talking with them so that we can see their point of view and also start that process of restorative justice rather than just being an enforcement entity. And so anytime that you have those questions, community, by all means, come by, but understand that the uniform that is worn by some people is just as different as a restaurant that you may go 2 blocks to, And so it's hard because we don't want that label either. Just like as an African-American, I don't want to be stereotyped. The same feeling I have as a police officer, because I know the passion and the hard work that I do in the community.
Thank you, Joe. Reverend Dollarhide, do you want to take the last word? I think you were about to say something.
Yeah, I really was just going to bring together what Gerald and Bola was saying, that what we've got to remember in the end is that we still must be advocates. We must protest, 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 and not see protest as a bad thing. It was because of the marching of John Lewis, Dr. King, and others that we are where we are today. So we've still got to protest. We've got to be advocates. And I teach taught my kids who are all grown now, grandkids, to speak out, to say something, because people don't change their minds unless they can see another point of view. And so let's get out there and let's protest and let's advocate and let's treat each other as human beings, but at the same time, tell our stories so we can begin to respect one another and see another point of view.
Thank you so much. Guys, I don't want to take any more of your time. This has been incredibly meaningful for me, and I'm sure for plenty of other people. We have recorded this, and we'll post this so that other people can see this conversation. Let's see. So thank you to everyone who's been joining us. And just so everyone knows, we will be posting and sending out links to books that we have at the library. So we have a lot of great books on this issue, ebooks, audiobooks, physical books, all of that stuff. So be sure to check that stuff out from the library. And be watching out for our fall program guide. We're going to continue this American Experiences series into the fall. We don't have our dates totally finalized yet, but we're going to start off sometime in September. We're going to do the Hispanic experience, and we're going to continue exploring other people's experiences in this country. So guys, thank you so much. This has been really, really wonderful. I really appreciate all of y'all. And that's it.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Yeah,
Yes,
have a good day.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.